what do men do when they retire? I don't know. One of the reasons for painting when I started was sort of stream of consciousness painting to have a deeper understanding of psyche or whatever. Success would be to, I think, do the process of creating the artwork and then being able to look at it afterwards and saying, I like that.
Hello and welcome to Your Creative Midlife. I'm Betsy Bush. I have a very special guest, and this is a question I've always wondered. What do people who have been in medical profession, scientists, that sort of thing, how do they organize their retirement? I have someone very special with me. He's someone I met in one of my art classes. He's a fellow painter, and I was really interested to learn that he is a retired anesthesiologist from Memorial Sloan Kettering, which is a major medical institution, not only in New York City, but in the world famous. Bob Veselis is here to talk about his art practice and how he transitioned from being in the world of medicine to now being an artist. Bob, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, my pleasure.
Right. So tell me how you came to your art practice. How long have you been retired? Maybe I should ask you that.
Yes, I've been retired for about 2 years now, and I met you at the art class that just happened over the last winter session, so that's where we ran into each other.
And have you always been a painter? Was that something you were doing on the side, or is this something brand new?
It's not brand new. I've been doing it off and on for quite some time. I would label myself as a weekend duffer as far as painting and art is concerned. Now that I'm retired, I have much more time and it's much easier to schedule time to do things. So I've picked it up
Right.
more now that I'm retired.
Yeah, I love what you're wearing. You have, is this your painting shirt underneath your jacket? Or
Yeah,
you
it's like
have,
a
yeah.
painting
Oh,
splash shirt.
I love your vibe. I have to say, I love your vibe. It feels to me like you kind of found your place in the world with your painting and all of that. Tell me about the art you're creating now, because you're using some collage, some items from your past life. Tell me about what you're doing.
I like to sort of use found objects. Like, for instance, this was a plain white t-shirt that was sort of boring, and then start to work with it to make it interesting. When I was working, one thing that I did was the shoes I would wear in the operating room were running shoes, but then I painted them so everybody would recognize that they were my shoes. So I did sort of things like that off and on. I sort of got into painting maybe 20 years ago or so and took some, it was sort of an open studio with a painter which was available in the area and was at a time that I could attend. And so I picked up techniques and so on about painting during that particular time. And, I have some paintings that are more traditional, as it were, that I worked on whenever I could. But over the years, I've gotten more into abstract and using different materials. And the collage class where we met was a good avenue for exploring different options in terms of expanding the vocabulary for expression in terms of painting and art.
In your professional life, was it unusual for you to have an arts practice on the side, or was that something you found your colleagues also had an artistic outlet? In the world of medicine, I think of anesthesiology as a very precise sort of profession.
That's true. I think people would had different activities where they could get away from work in terms of their off time. For instance, there was somebody who would bake cakes and bring them into work, and that was her way of being creative. In terms of painting, I'm trying to think. Not a lot, but people had different hobbies, I guess. And for me, it happened to be art as well. As you can see, piano. I've played piano since I was young
Wow.
and did a lot of it in high school, university, but that fell by the wayside during work. And now I'm taking it, refreshing my piano skills and getting more involved in that music as well. Actually, I was trained in classical music, but now I'm delving into learning jazz, how to play jazz
Wow.
piano, which
Oh,
is
good for you.
sort of the same trajectory as with painting, getting
Hmm.
to, as it were, a more abstract way of playing piano than what I'm used to or what I've done in the past.
Yeah. That is a gorgeous grand piano I see in the background, which is obviously your
That was
instrument.
one of my late acquisitions. I got it a few years just before retirement for the very purpose that I knew I was going to be really delving into it more after retirement. So it was sort of a bit planned that way.
Wow. That's so interesting that both with art and music, you started out with something kind of the mainstream structured art, and then maybe you're feeling freed up to do really kind of finding your own voice or your own whatever is inside of you you're expressing or what.
Correct. That's what I'm trying to do is have well, people talk about channels of communication. Some people do poetry, some people write journals, some people produce plays or whatever. So for me, it's music, both listening to music and playing it and painting and expanding, I guess, the bandwidth of the channel to try and find a new way of getting in touch with that creative part of myself. I would say that I would approach many things in a creative fashion, even though they may not be considered creative in the traditional sense. For instance, when I was working, I was also doing research, and in order to do the research and manage all of that was sort of a creative outlet in the workplace.
That's
So there's
interesting you
many
say that.
ways,
Yeah.
yeah, there's many
Because
ways of being creative.
of being creative, because I've heard people say, I think of science as a very kind of structured field with a lot of rules, but to do research you have to think, well, outside the box, as they say. You have to think creatively to see what maybe exploring boundaries that have not been broached before, or thinking about what happens if we do this, or that nobody else has ever thought of before.
Right, right.
Would you
And
say?
you're
Yeah.
presented with problems and trying to, in a sense, figure them out with creative solutions. And so that was very, very satisfying to be able to do that. And also unsatisfying when you weren't able to do that.
Right. So, Bob, where did you grow up and where did you go to school?
Well, I grew up in Toronto.
Oh,
My parents were immigrants from war-torn Eastern Europe,
really?
and a lot of immigrants ended up in Canada and the US.
Sure.
My parents originally wanted to come, interestingly enough, wanted to come to the States, but they weren't able to get a visa, or it wasn't room, or work application, whatever. So they ended up in Canada, with initially staying with some friends that had immigrated before. And I, born and raised in Toronto, went to the University of Toronto, and I was interested in, of all things, hyperbaric and diving medicine while I was in medical school, and ended up doing an elective at Duke University because they have a big Navy diving facility there.
You
I
knew.
found
Right.
that most interesting.
Yeah.
So they offered me a position for anesthesia training, which I was very interested in. Ended up in the States there and did my medical training there, and met my wife there, and ended up in the States for my career.
Wow. How long have you been in New York, in the New York area?
Well, surprisingly enough, more years than I was in Toronto. It's hard to believe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Been here for about 30 years.
Yeah.
We raised all our children here. They went to school here, and Now they're sort of dispersed in different locations on the eastern part of the country.
What do they think of your artistic practice? You're moving into the artistic world.
I think they think it's great. One of our daughters is really an artist. She's really talented, most interested in art, ended up after various explorations as a teacher, and she's teaching middle school art now, but is really passionate about art. But of course, you have to earn a living.
Sure.
So that's where the teaching comes in. And she's a really great teacher, and she enjoys doing that. So it sort of runs a bit in the family, I would say.
That's terrific. I'm really interested in a lot of the research that is coming out now about the importance of creativity and artistic practice in longevity, in keeping brains healthy and staving off dementia and that sort of thing. Are you tuned into any of that at all? Are you aware of it?
Yes, I've been reading the same sort of stream of information as you have in that regard. It's a very good hypothesis. I think it's probably true. I think a lot of things in terms of aging boils down to if you don't use it, you lose it with physical activity and
Sure.
so on. So I think it's important for creativity to be that way. One thing I've certainly noticed is frequently going to the art classes. Before I go in the morning, I feel like the last thing I want to do is go to the art class. And then I go to the art class and really shift gears, and then by the end of the art class I feel great. I'm really glad I went. So there's something that happens with the whole process that I think is very important. How that all translates to longevity and so on is hard to figure out, nail down the details, but I'm sure there's something there.
Yeah. I find that when I get lost in a project, it's a great feeling. And I love that sense of flow that I get and the experimentation of what happens if I do this? What happens if I'm doing collage, and I think you're doing a lot of collage too. What happens if I
Yes.
put this here or that there? And
Right.
what transpires from those particular decisions?
It's a different channel of communication, nonverbal. It's a whole different way of interacting with the world, which I think is very important. It will be really interesting with all this AI revolution going on,
Yeah.
that's very mechanistic. It's built by, even though people don't understand how it really works, it's an emergent property of the system. It's so complicated that nobody knows how it works, but it's still a mechanical thing, and it's replacing a lot of things that we've done in the past ourselves, like summarizing a whole series of articles and literature into some sort of summary format. But it'll be interesting to see how AI relates to creativity. I think that will sort of really help define what is human and what is mechanical. And it'll be interesting to see how all that pans out over time.
I wonder about that myself, right? The impact of AI on all the normal things that we've always done in the past, right? Summarizing a conversation. What was that conversation about? And even to the point where you can ask it to provide an image, and you can ask it to, give you an image of, I don't know, something, a scene from a story or with characters, and it comes up with something. And I find that's really weird. Like, where is the human, imagination in that?
Right. Well, there's really no imagination. It's just whatever's scraped off the internet
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
put together according to some learning principle. But I think that will refine what imagination actually is.
What about the use of our hands, the hand-brain connection? When so many things done for us, I wonder, there's such an elemental thing between the use of our hands and our brains telling our hands what to do, and also the hands giving feedback to the brain, which is our way of interacting with the world. As someone who was in medicine and also as a musician as well as an artist, there must be some science there between your brain and your hands telling your fingers what notes to play and things like that.
Absolutely. And I think that's the whole basis of people like to tinker. They like to build cuckoo clocks or work on wood projects, or there's something fundamentally important about doing that. That's human evolution, and the use of tools is really very fundamentally important. And I think that there's a two-way street between your body and your brain in terms of, for instance, musicians who have musical training from early on. The same thing with language. You can actually see differences in their brains from people who maybe learn language or music later on. So there's a two-way street. And for instance, my wife is not a musician. She likes music, but I can hear things in the music that is sort of opaque for her. And the same thing with people who, your mother tongue versus a language that you learn later on.
Sure.
There's the plasticity, the changes in the brain that go along with that, these different channels of communication. So I think human-wise, we've had the ability to build things and work with our hands is a very fundamental part of being human.
Yeah, and I guess the question arises, what happens when we stop doing that? You mentioned like tinkering, and I think about sewing and knitting and cooking and a lot of repairing things, right? Sometimes you had to be creative to repair something. It's, I'm missing a part. Can I MacGyver something to, make it work?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's a very important creative activity.
I'm wondering, let me ask you what it's like to be the only man in a class full of women. Because my thing about the whole creativity thing, and my hope that people will show up at art classes, is that usually the men are missing. And I'm wondering why you think that might be.
Well, I can't speak to that. I don't know. I think a lot of it is cultural. And I'm really, I would say, disappointed with the whole manosphere type of thing and traditional gender roles and so on and so forth. Society seems to be going back and forth on all of those issues. I think it's probably, I don't think there's anything fundamentally different. I think it's a lot to do with culture and society more than anything else. Also, probably in different areas of the country or the city or different locations, you would see different percentages, proportions of men and women. It's interesting. What do men do when they retire? I don't know. Maybe they really delve into sports that they weren't able to do, or hobbies, but maybe their creativity, for instance, people work on vintage cars and tinker in the garage.
Yeah.
So that's sort of a creative outlet.
But I sometimes feel like, I think you're right about the gender roles, because I think when we were growing up, I think got a very clear message about girls do this, boys do that. And I wonder if when you got a very clear message about certain things. And I wonder what it would take. Do you think some men are really missing out on the satisfaction or the pleasure that might come from doing a painting class?
Well, exactly. I think more generally that someone who's not able to engage in creative activities is missing out on a lot. Another sad part of society today is sort of the model of education, and for young people going into adults, things that get cut are the creative aspects. Everybody's got to meet a metric, reading, math, have to become an engineer or financial person to earn a living sort of thing. And the creative humanity stuff is being tossed aside, and I think that's a really big mistake. My daughter, who's the art teacher, there's a lot of focus on math and reading, science, it's good for science, but cutbacks in terms of art and literature and
Always.
humanities.
Always.
And I think that's a sad thing to see. And hopefully the pendulum will swing back at some point.
There's a famous research project from the mid 60s that was conducted by a NASA scientist who was concerned that there weren't enough creative scientists coming into the field that would help the NASA program get to the moon and do whatever. And that for him, you needed to have creative thought to figure out how do we do this? Because you need to do something very different to launch a rocket that would get people to the moon and beyond.
Right,
And he did this very interesting thing, which was all kids. He followed a group of kids from like 5 through high school. And at the beginning, the 5-year-olds all thought they were creative people. But as the years went on, fewer and fewer of those children identified themselves as creative. And until you got to like high school, where like 10% thought of themselves as creative, whereas at the beginning, 98% of them thought they were creative. And he made the point is like, we're pushing the creativity out of these kids because what the message they get is the right answer. What's the right answer? You have to learn the right answer that the teacher or the textbook tells you is the right answer. You really are discouraging people from thinking. You have to teach them not to be creative, was I think his point. And we need more creative thinking.
Absolutely. And a good example of that is that movie Apollo 13. It came up with creative solutions to a big problem.
Yes.
And the trend in education is training to the test and protocols and algorithms, and that's all somewhat anti-creative. And science is really, if you think about it, really a creative endeavor. The discoveries in science, the big things in science are all really based on creativity, being able to harness that power.
That's so interesting to hear. I guess I think of science, maybe I connected too much with math, which is you need to know the right answer in order to advance. But I think maybe in advanced science, you need to figure out what's going on.
Yeah,
you
I
have
think
to
of all the even very big, mathematicians that win the mathematics prize and so on, they come up with their solutions in dreams or by gut reactions, looking at a problem and then coming up with a solution that you wouldn't have been able to get to by going ABC type of thinking process.
Wow.
The benzene ring was Kekule's dream, that he saw the snake, sort of the Ouroboros snake eating the tail, and he came up with the cyclic structure of benzene, for instance. So, that creativity is absolutely key for those big discoveries.
That's fascinating. Wow. Thank you for that. I really appreciate it. Tell me the different things that you're doing, because I always loved looking over at what you were doing at Collage and some painting and things like that. And tell me how you come up with that sort of thing, with what you're doing.
It's hard to say. One of the reasons for painting when I started was sort of stream of consciousness painting, to have a deeper understanding of psyche or whatever. That doing stream of consciousness painting where you just let yourself go. Other people do like automatic handwriting or making drawings with their eyes closed or whatever. That sort of thing. When I did the painting sessions with the painter, learned some techniques and did sort of more traditional type of more realistic paintings, but they always sort of had an element of some abstraction or some twist in them, and that's sort of slowly developed over the years into more expression of not tied to realism, for instance. One thing I've always liked is sculpture gardens. That's one of my favorite things.
Yeah.
That there's this work of art that is solid, is in a setting, takes up space, and is present without feeling inhibited, for lack of a better word. That it's there and people react to the presence of art object in different ways, but the art object is there without making excuses for being there, in a sense. So the development of painting into a more abstract form is sort of a similar process, where you're just having a more direct expression of, for lack of a better word, gut feeling. And people see different things because it's sort of abstract, but the painting exists on its own. And collage is just have more tools for expression. Frequently, maybe not frequently, but not infrequently, I have some sort of idea from a dream, and then try to put that down into the painting or the collage and just put it on the paper and then work things around it on sort of a gut level or without really planning. Some people have their process where they do 10 sketches of what they want to paint and then finally paint it. I'm sort of the opposite. That
Me
I
too. Yeah.
just start and work without having really a set idea of what I want to do. Maybe some, overall guideline that I start with a very abstract idea, but the actual details are just left to the however things develop. So over the years, I've tended to more abstract expression and, in a sense, go with the flow in creating the artwork.
What does success look like to you?
Success, that's a very good question. I think success is terrifying because it's a goal that's really unattainable, in a sense. For somebody who's making a living as an artist, success is, of course, being recognized and networking and having your artwork shown and so on. So that's sort of the practical definition of success. For me, success, I think, due the process of creating the artwork and then being able to look at it afterwards and saying, I like that. And it's always very gratifying when somebody else says that, when they look at it. But I think success, on the other hand, the evil part of success is then you afraid to do something because you think it's not going to be successful for whatever reason. And it's sort of a hindrance. You're censoring yourself from doing things because you're not sure it's going to be a success. Or performing music. I mean, that's the classic terror of kids learning to play a musical instrument is playing in front of an audience and making a mistake. So that's sort of the evil side of success. So I'm not sure what success really is.
Well, maybe you're just being able to do what you want.
Right.
Right? I mean, I kind of feel that way myself. I'm like, we both had our works accepted to the next exhibition at the Pelham Art Center.
Yeah, which is very nice.
Which is very nice, right? But now you always worry, at least I'm worrying now. It's like the next effort, is the next effort going to be as good as my first effort?
Right.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I get very much what you're saying is if we can just be satisfied with the process as opposed to the product.
Right.
Because I think a lot of people we've both seen in class that we have classmates who they do 5 and 6 canvases and they're all great. And I think when you do enough, you just keep going. I think a lot of times it's easy to get, I'll never do as well, or I'm afraid that I won't surpass, my most recent effort, and then you freeze up.
Yeah, it's the fear of trying. And that's exactly what happens to that you were mentioning with the kids when they're all start off creative, a blank slate, and willing to explore all sorts of different things, and then for whatever reason the system hones it down into their definition of what is creative, what is success, what you need to do.
And I appreciate what you say about kids kids learning musical instruments and then, the fear of the recital. Why in the
Yes.
world do we force kids to perform at a recital if they really don't want to? I mean, to me, it can really take the joy out of learning. It's like you should be learning for your own satisfaction and because you love to do it. You shouldn't be forced to play in front of your parents and a lot of strangers. And
Right,
then
right.
that can really take to me, that seems to be more a function of the teacher and the music school or whatever. We need to show off all of our
Right.
kids.
Yeah.
And maybe some of them
Yeah.
love to do
Yeah.
that, but there are definitely kids. It's like, don't force it if they don't want to. Don't take the pleasure out of learning to play.
Exactly. Exactly. I think that's becoming more and more recognized. Unfortunately, with all the economic pressures and funding and so on, that a lot of that gets lost in the shuffle. But I think the recognition of the traditional apprenticeship type of system, it's good if you have a good mentor, but as it's happening with, let's say, the chef at Noma, that that's not the way to really, yeah, maybe you get a great product, but the cost for that is in human suffering is not worth it.
I'm not sure I understood the reference. The chef.
No, it's sort of like being abused by the top chef
Oh.
and being belittled because that's the method of training rather than being a sort of supportive. It's sort of the kitchen confidential type
Oh,
of
got it, got it. Yep, yep, yep.
system.
Were you one of these medical residents who had to work, 2 days straight, and it was kind of hazing sort of opportunity, right? Are you going to be tough enough to get
Right,
through
right.
this?
Yeah, there's a lot of that. Actually, that was one of the reasons I ended up going into anesthesia as opposed to other fields like surgery. The people I came across, and in those days, anesthesia was not a rotation in medical school or internship. And the people I came across at that stage, I really liked their personalities and their approach to work and so on. Whereas the more traditional captain of the ship and hazing was maybe, let's say, in the surgical specialties. And that sort of turned me off a bit in terms of pursuing that type of specialization. So yes, that definitely exists. It's becoming less so, and that's much better for the trainees and also, the salaries, the relative salaries. Right now, residents are paid much better in relationship than they used to be, so that you can actually start a family and have kids and still be in training, whereas before it was really, really difficult. So that there is a general trend towards that. Unfortunately, it seems it's going the other way now. But hopefully that's just a short setback in terms of the general economy and what people have to do in order to have a fulfilling life.
Yeah. There's also maybe a nice thing for you where you can practice art and not depend on it for your livelihood.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I feel bad for kids. I remember maybe it was the 90s when all the arts and music classes at a lot of New York City schools were just eliminated. And
Right, right.
and it's like you're robbing kids not only now of being creative, but a lifelong joy that they can find later in life that could really improve their well-being, their health span. So
Exactly,
it gives them
exactly.
something to draw on.
Actually, one of my favorite books was written by the current Prime Minister of Canada, Mark Carney. He
Oh.
wrote a book called Values. He's an economist, and he was the head of the central bank both in Canada and in Britain, so he's very renowned. But his argument is that, yeah, capitalism's okay, but the big problem is that a lot of those things that you just mentioned aren't assigned an economic value.
Yes.
And they need to be in order to have society function the way we want it to. So I'm happy to see that he's doing well
He's
from
one of my
Lester.
heroes now, Bob. Thank you so much for bringing up Mark
Yeah,
Carney, and I will have to go get that book, and because art and creativity absolutely need to be better valued in our society,
right, right.
and more consumption of art
Yes,
should be encouraged, at a community level. There's so much
right.
art here in Westchester, for example, that people could be taking advantage of. And the research is showing that just going to an art museum or a concert or something can really be good for your brain. And
Absolutely.
Bob, is there anything we haven't talked about that you want to say? Is there anything I haven't asked you that you think might be important?
Well, I think we had a nice, wide-ranging conversation.
I think so too.
It was very enlightening. I can't think of anything at the moment, and it's
Okay.
wonderful to hope that there are people that have sort of the same value system out there that are going to help change things for the better as
Yeah.
time goes on.
Yeah.
Actually, when you look at history, all the big composers, Mozart, Bach, had to have some sort of sponsor to be able to do
Yeah.
what they did.
Yeah.
They had to be with some sort of king or royalty or some house in order to be artistic. And slowly that's become democratized through society. And now we're sort of stepping back to that. If you want to do something like that, you need to have a sponsor. That's sort of really limiting what society can really do.
Yeah, we have Bach's letters where he's always complaining that, he doesn't have enough money at all these kids, right?
Right.
And he was, a church organist, and I think he depended on extra things like being paid extra for funerals, and then he'd complain that there was a healthy wind blowing through the town, but not enough people were dying.
Yes.
So
Exactly.
let's not hope we have to be in that same situation.
Right. Right.
Bob Veselis, thank you so much. This was such a great conversation, and I look forward to seeing what further artwork you produce.
And so
It's
do
been
I.
really fun. Yeah,
Well done.
great.
Thank you for a very enjoyable hour.
Great. Thank you. I've really enjoyed it too. Okay. I'd love to know if you're doing something creative in your midlife. Please reach out to me at yourcreativemidlife.com. And if you liked us, please give us a thumbs up and leave a review. Thanks again. I'm Betsy Bush.